My beloved FreeMelons, thank you so much for joining me. I never introduced myself with my last name included, so I'm going to start doing that this year. My name is Eli Martyr. Yes, my last name is Martyr. That's not a fake name. That's actually my name. Today I'm very excited. We are going to be tackling the food combining subject that has been asked of me many times before. So finally, I'm here to bring that to you. Buckle up. It's going to be a good one. So let's break down the general format of this lecture. First, we're going to start with part one, why food combining is important. Then we're going to go into actual food combining principles. And then we'll wrap it up and summarize with some basic points that get the whole picture across. Before we get going, I want to start by saying food combining. Extremely important subject, and also not important at all. One of the least important things that you need to worry about. Why do I say this? I say this because food combining is only important if you do not eat like a natural human being. If you eat in accord with your biology and in harmony with your physiological makeup as a human being, if you eat in accordance with that, food combining becomes something that you do not have to think about. Because the natural eating proclivities that would be born of a human being under natural settings immediately harmonize it with food. It's only when we get into the cultural eating practices and all the garbage that comes with eating and living in high society, now it becomes necessary to add a little bit of human ingenuity into the mix and determine what goes well with this and what goes well with that, yada, yada, yada. So now you got to complicate. As soon as you complicate things, right? Okay, now you need to take a more left-brained approach and decide, okay, well, this goes with it, blah, blah, blah. But none of that's necessary, and I'll get to that in a bit. So if I ignore natural eating, right, and I focus on just the cultural eating, then what I'm doing here is I'm going to be teaching you food combining so as to minimize the damage that cultural eating has on your body, okay? So I am not advocating these food combining principles. What I am doing is I am sharing them with you so that you can minimize the damage that these foods have on your body. I hope you understand that. I hope that's very clear. Part one, why food combining? Modern eating habits are so contrary to the natural eating habits of man in his original state, whereby he relied more on his natural intuition to determine what was food and what wasn't. But because culture bamboozles our intuition and our observational faculties, we're left utterly confused as to what is food and what isn't. We just kind of accept everything under the sun, and that's not correct. So now all of a sudden we need a more scientific approach to be able to minimize this damage of all the types of foods and culture. Now, to start off with in food combining, the first thing I'm going to talk about is one of the natural laws of nature. That is the law of polarity. Everything in nature, every life form, every this, every that, anything that is matter in the universe contains within it the essence of polarity. Everything in the cosmos operates under this principle. The best example, male, female, love, hate, hot, cold, beautiful, ugly, harmony, chaos, hard, soft, on and on and on it goes. If something is manifesting in the physical plane, then one of the principles that undergirds that structure is polarity, the essence of polarity. This dualistic principle, this is not up for debate. This is the essence of nature, and there is no getting around this, Male and female. This is the quintessential example of the law of polarity in action. Male, female. Two opposite energies. Only these two opposite energies, when combined, result in creation of something new. So, for all the social justice nonsense going on out there, males and females are exactly the same. They are exactly equal. This is nonsense, okay? These are opposite polarities, and it is only the opposite polarities, when they harmonize, they become the oneness that is the essence of their higher constitutions. You can't get a man and a man to create life. You can't get a woman and a woman to create life. This is just an impossibility, okay? So anyway, that's a different subject, but yeah, law of polarity, very important. Now, in terms of digestion, this law manifests itself as the potential hydrogen constitution of the body. Potential hydrogen, pH, meaning acid or alkaline, okay? So it's the acid-alkaline balance in the body that is the expression of polarity within the organism. all foods require digestive enzymes in the body in order to break them down. These digestive enzymes all operate on a varying scale of alkalinity or acidity. So each enzyme has a particular food that it is most suited to breaking down, and it can only do that in a particular environment, more alkaline or more acidic. Some foods require an acid medium to digest in, others require an alkaline medium to digest in, and some foods are somewhere in between, okay? Now in chemistry, when we mix acids and alkalines together, they will neutralize each other to a proportional degree. Thus, when you are eating, a prime consideration in eating is not to mix acid and alkaline foods together. That is, you do not mix foods that require acid mediums to digest in with foods that require alkaline mediums to digest in. Okay? We haven't even talked about food combining yet. These are prime considerations, before we get into food combining. It's seen that the body prefers an alkaline environment with which to be self-sustained in. The blood, for example, needs to be alkaline at about 7.34 or 7. I can't remember the exact value, but it's somewhere in there. Google it, check it out. So the body prefers the alkaline state. Now, of all of the foods that are possible to eat, what foods result in an alkaline residue in the body? Isn't it a coincidence? The only foods that are suitable for human nutrition are the ones that result in an alkaline ash in the body. All other foods, starches, meats, dairies, nuts, processed foods, all of the stuff that is not actually human food results in acid. All of the natural human foods result in bodily alkalinity. So you've got fruits and starchless green leaf vegetables in the alkaline side, and everything else on the acid side. So if you just pay attention to this law of polarity in eating, just this law alone, you will avoid any complications of food combining. You won't have to worry about it. You just eat fruits and vegetables and you're good, right? You're pretty good just with that, okay? That's the prime consideration. Law of polarity, don't mix acid and alkaline foods, stick with natural human foods, and you're pretty much good to go. Okay? The next prime consideration that I want to get into before we start talking about food combining, don't eat more than 2 to 3 different types of foods. You don't want to eat 2 fruits and some veggies. You don't want to eat 3 different kinds of veggies. Just the simpler the better. Remember my lecture on simplicity way back in the beginning? Watch that again if you need to. In the natural world, all animals, all life forms on this planet abide by this very simple rule, very observable rule, that when they eat something, they eat only that one particular food item and they don't combine foods like humans do. When's the last time you saw a cheetah take down a gazelle and then munch on a salad of 20 different other leafy green vegetables while eating, the gazelle? Never, right? It doesn't happen like that. Giraffes eat leaves, and there I go with my obsession with giraffes again. I don't know what it is about giraffes. I just like them. I like using them as an example, but giraffes eat leaves and that's it. They don't eat with avocados and they don't eat with tomatoes and it's just leaves, right? All animals do this. They eat just one single item of food. We should emulate our behaviors on this fundamental guideline that nature gives us. I'm not saying that we eat what the animals eat, right? I'm saying that you eat in the style, in the manner that they eat, right? The one single food item. Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. It is not nutrition that you need to worry about. It is not the sheer bulk of nutrition that you need to worry yourself with. It is how well you can absorb the nutrition in single elements of food. And you can better absorb nutrition if you give your body a simple task of eating simple foods in simple combinations. Mono-item meals are the best, so only one type of fruit or one type of vegetable. So, 2 to 3 different types of raw vegetables, that's okay. Fruits, mono fruits are the best. You stick with these 2 prime considerations, law of polarity and eating minimally, you're great. Last prime consideration, do not cook food. Do not cook food, that's it. Don't cook your food. Cooking is death. Cooking is the death of food. Cooked food is dead food. Fire destroys. There's no other way around this. If you don't believe me, set fire to your hand, let it burn for a couple of minutes, not very long. Tell me how well your sense of touch works for the rest of your life. Very, very compromised, okay? Heat destroys, right? It is a very obvious concept to understand. Any child can understand this. So when you apply it to food, why would you imagine that it does better work for your food when it's destroyed? Okay? Don't cook food. Plain and simple. Okay, part 2. Food combining. Now, this, like I said before, is only important if you disregard all of the prime considerations, all the requisite behaviors that are necessary for eating like a natural human being. Okay, if we dismiss all of that, and now we're coming into the realm of just a normal,
that it can carry bacteria, it can carry bacteria, it can carry bacteria.
To do this is just like breaded chicken technique. Put it back in the milk and you're gonna dredge it through here. The hot oil.
Now make sure the oil is hot, and then you put the beef right in, just like that. Now isn't that great? Then you get your broccoli. Oh, isn't that good? Good idea.
Now that these are all ready, the plating, nice smooth hummus, putting it right in the center of the platter. Putting some extra virgin olive oil in the cavity that I've created. Boiled chickpeas, creating a nice little design.
Now see, now you can strain and drain. Look at how green it is. Just like my cooking, very green. And then you put it right into the beef. That's it. Now you mix it up. Oh, isn't that great?
Now we need to start worrying about food combining, okay? So, let's get into it. First, let's talk about starch. Starch digestion begins in the mouth with an enzyme that you secrete called ptyalin. Once the ptyalin works on the starch, it gets into the stomach. So once the ptyalin continues to work on the starch in the stomach, it passes on to the small intestine, where it is then further broken down. So starch works in the mouth and in the intestine primarily, not as much in the stomach. A little bit in the stomach, but not as much. Starch requires an alkaline medium to be digested. So in the stomach, where you get the release of hydrochloric acid, which is highly acidic, you do not get this release of hydrochloric acid if you're eating primarily a starch meal. Thus, acids will impair the digestion of all starches because acids and alkalins do not mix, like we said earlier, and they neutralize each other. When these digestive enzymes that are released to break down food are neutralized, well then you don't have the potency of the digested fluid to digest the food. And what happens if the food is not being digested properly? What does it do? It sits there and it rots and it ferments and it putrefies, right? So you need the proper medium to digest the food. Protein, for example, requires an acid medium to digest. So if you have a protein and a starch in the same meal, in the same bite, well, this is very confusing for the body. So now the acids and the starches release conflicting digestive enzymes and you don't get any digestion. Sugar also interferes with the digestion of starch. Why? Because sugar doesn't require any digestion, barely any digestion in the mouth or in the stomach. It just goes right down into the intestine and starts digesting there. So when you eat sugar and starch in the same meal, right, your body is confused. It detects the sugar and it says, oh, we don't need to release any ptyalin because there's no starch. And so it just, it doesn't release anything and it goes down into the stomach. Well, that's a problem because if there is starch, it did require the ptyalin. So now the ptyalin gets interfered with and you're left with a food solution that is not being properly digested. Which brings us to our first rules of starch food combining. Rule number 1, never combine starch with acids. Starch being potatoes, quinoa, legumes like beans, lentils, wheat, any kind of bread or whole wheat, refined wheat, doesn't matter, same thing. Beets, carrots, all of these dense starches, turnips, all of these starches, okay? You never combine them ever, ever, ever with any acids, including fruit acids or vinegars or any kind of acids like that. Rule number 2, never combine starch with any sugars, ever. So for every single time you've had pancakes and you thought that you were being healthy by throwing some fruit sauce or fruit jams or anything on your pancakes, you were wrong. You were doing yourself an incredible disservice and you were not getting digestion at all. All you were getting was fermentation, rot, garbage, and waste and toxemia. Never combine starch with any kind of sugar at all. Oh, you want to put maple syrup on your pancakes? Congratulations. You just sent a nuke down your GI tract. Oh, you had potatoes for dinner and now you want a lovely dessert, including fruit? Guess what? You sent a second nuke down your GI tract. Rule number 3, you never combine starch with protein. Ever. It's the acid medium that is necessary for protein digestion and the alkaline medium of starch digestion that conflict with each other. So you eat the starch and protein in the same meal and you get rotting. You do not get digestion. You get rotting and fermentation. Yeah, so every time you had steak and potatoes, you were destroying yourself internally. Every time you had sushi, where you had rice and fish, you're destroying yourself internally. You're having lentils with salad and nuts, right? High protein, high fat, also nuts. Nah, none of this works. You're killing yourself inside. So, those are the three major takeaways for starch. Protein. What about protein? There is no digestion of protein in the mouth. Protein digestion begins in the stomach with heavy acids. When it comes to fats, there's a stomach lipase that digests the fat. But this lipase is inhibited by acid. So let's say you eat a fatty avocado by itself, your digestion will be alright, even though I don't recommend eating avocados, period. But if you have protein with that avocado, well, now you're screwed. Because the acid required for the protein digestion inhibits the release of lipase, and now you can't digest your fat. So because of that, and all of the things that we mentioned before, fats, sugars, and acids all impair the digestion of protein. Rule number 1 for protein, never combine protein with fat. Rule number 2, never combine proteins with sugars or fruits of any kind, cranberries, pineapples, whatever it is. As we said before, starches and proteins don't go together, so you can consider that rule number 3. Okay? No starch and protein together in the same meal.
Rule number 4. One of the most important enzymes in protein digestion in the stomach is an enzyme called pepsin. Pepsin breaks down proteins into their individual polypeptide constituents. Now, because pepsin requires an acidic medium to digest in the stomach, it is often mistakenly thought that eating an acid with your heavy meat or your heavy protein food will assist in the digestive process. This is actually wrong. Acids like vinegar or fruit acids will actually impair the release of pepsin from the stomach. So if you eat meat, for example, the body understands that it's going to be a heavy acid that breaks down the meat, but I guess that's different than having an acid right in the mouth, and that sets into motion a chain of events that in fact inhibit the release of pepsin from the stomach. So combining acids with your protein is a no-no.
Let's talk about fat. Fat digestion begins in the small intestine. A little bit of fat digestion happens in the stomach, but not much. It's not worth mentioning. So most of it takes place in the small intestine. The presence of fat inhibits the release of hydrochloric acid from the stomach, okay? Like we said before, and you'll find, we're repeating ourselves very, very often. But when the body detects fat, right, it doesn't need the hydrochloric acid to digest the fat, so it doesn't release it. So because fat inhibits the release of acidic hydrochloric acid, fat should never be eaten with protein, right? With things that require an acid medium to digest in. Now, some health practitioners will tell you that fats can be combined well with acidic fruits. I'm not really of that camp. I still think it's a much safer option to abstain from any type of mixing when you're eating fruit. Those should be eaten by themselves, and eat the fats with only soft leafy green vegetables. We'll get to vegetables in just a second though. You will also hear that starches combine well with fats. If you have a quinoa or a lentil meal, then you can eat that well with avocado or olives or whatnot. So these starches and fats go together. You will not hear me advocate this food combining principle. It's just not safe enough. I don't believe that these things pair as well as most people say they do. For one thing, because we know that, as we said before, that starch begins in the mouth and fat doesn't begin in the mouth. Right? Fat begins mostly in the intestine. So if you're eating a starch and a fat, in the same meal, well, it's confusing. It's always confusing. Any kind of combining of foods, the more intricate the combination, the more confusing it is for your body. This is a general principle that I cannot ignore. So I can't safely advocate that starches and fats are good for you, in the same meal. I could be wrong about that. I don't think I am, but many practitioners do say that that's okay. So you would have to experiment with this and see how you feel, see how your body reacts, and, you be the judge. But as for the doctrine of simplicity, I can't speak highly enough about that. You got two computers. They're both running a particular software. Which one will work better? The computer that is trying to operate that particular software with 50 other operations going on in the background? Or the computer that is just running that one piece of software? Which one is going to work better? Obviously the one that's only doing the one operation, right? Simple operations, simple efficiency. Complex operations, many different things going on, slowed down, impaired efficiency, right? This is a general principle. It's a natural principle. Anyone can understand this. So,
rule number 1, never combine fats with proteins for the reasons that we just mentioned. And rule number 2, never combine fats with sugars. It's interesting. The combination of fats with sugars is something that's rarely seen in nature. In macronutrient blends. It's more so something that man-made foods and cultural foods have, like donuts and sugary chemical concoctions that pass as food these days. So it's common in those, but not as common in nature. There was a study done where they fed 3 groups of rats different meals. One group of rats was fed sugar-based meals, the other group was fed fat-based meals, and the other group was fed sugar and fat-based meals in a combination. The fat and sugar group experienced much greater weight gain than the other 2 groups. So the combination of this fat and sugar is not a good idea.
let's go on to vegetables. So far you've heard me say all of the things that you shouldn't do with the proteins and the starches and the fats. I can start getting into what you can do when we talk about vegetables. Vegetables are the great neutralizer. Leafy green starch-less vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, like your spinach, your cabbage, your, kale, all that kind of stuff. All of those vegetables have enzymes that can digest them in many different pH mediums. Okay, so vegetables can be digested in alkaline mediums, in acidic mediums, they're neutral. So, and they've got lots of enzymes that can work on them in different environments, which makes vegetables a very good food item to pair with all of the things that we were talking about earlier, like proteins and starches and fats and whatnot. Vegetables require an enzyme called cellulase to break down the cellulose in vegetables. The cells in the plant have their cell walls that are made of cellulose, okay? It's what gives the plant its form. Humans do not have enzymes with which to digest cellulose, right? They don't have this cellulase to break down the cellulose, which is why when we eat vegetables, it's good fiber, because we can't break down the cellulose. So it just kind of moves through us like a broom, and it picks up other crap that's in the GI system and it helps to move it out. It's also one of the reasons that makes it obvious that we're not really herbivores, because if we were herbivores, we would have better equipment with which to break down the vegetables, but we don't. It kind of just goes through us, right? But it makes vegetables very good to pair with other types of foods. Unnatural foods like the protein concentrated foods and the starch concentrated foods. And because we don't have the proper enzymes to break down the cellulose, it becomes the role of the gut bacteria to serve this role, to break down that cellulose. So rule number 1 with vegetables, you can combine your vegetables with protein. Rule number 2, you can combine your vegetables with starch. Leafy green vegetables with starch or protein. Rule number 3, you can mix your vegetables with fat. These are all good combinations. Vegetables are like the equalizer in food combining. You will hear many camps talk about combining vegetables with fruit. I am not really of that camp. Fruits should be eaten on their own. You probably can get away with some of the fruity vegetables like cucumbers and peppers, eating them with fruits. If you've ever tried, it's not really there's something, I don't know, something I can just intuit about eating peppers with, it just doesn't go well together. However, from a food combining perspective, you probably can get away with these combinations of vegetables and fruit. Cut up mango into your salad or whatnot. Or cut up apple into your salad. You can do these things. It's probably not ideal. Is it the worst of the food combining mistakes that you could make though? No, definitely not, right? If you're gonna err on the side of mixing vegetables and fruit. But in general, vegetables are pretty safe to mix with everything. Milk and dairy. What about milk and dairy? I'm not going to spend much time on this. Milk and dairy. Milk is a concentrated food on its own. You do not mix milk with anything, or dairy with anything. If you're eating a dairy food item, eat that item by itself, no combinations at all. Not even vegetables, right? Milk has so many different types of nutrients and hormones and whatnot. If you're eating cow milk, which you shouldn't be, yeah, never eat dairy with anything else. Adding dairy to a meal will increase the GI transit time astronomically. Let's say you have cheese, right, with a meal of starch and proteins. You're screwed for the day. You shouldn't eat anything else for the rest of the day. So if you have any kind of cheese or something in the morning with a starch, right, I would advise fasting for the rest of the day. You're screwed. Like, the amount of GI transit time is going to be like 6 hours and beyond, depending on how much you've eaten, right? So yeah, milk, no human being has any business eating dairy, but if you do, eat only dairy and nothing else, okay? That's all I'm going to say about that. And finally, we come to fruits, the number one food of man. How do we eat fruits? You eat fruits on their own. You don't combine fruits with anything else out there. No proteins, no starches, no fats, nothing. If you're asking me, not even with vegetables, but you can experiment on your own and see how you feel with that. You would only combine the fruits with sweet fruits, acidic fruits with acidic fruits. People talk about the subacid fruits, and you can combine sweet with subacid and acid with subacid, but not acid with sweet fruit. So, and that's common. You'll find that everywhere you search for food combining advice. So fruits you eat by themselves, usually mono meals are best, but only 2 to 3 combinations of different types of fruits at most. Other than that, you will eat melons by themselves. Melon digests so fast. It's so high in water content that it kind of just goes right through you and is absorbed so quickly that eating a melon with another type of fruit that digests a bit more slowly, the slower digesting fruit will hold up the melon and it will lead to a bit more fermentation. So you want to avoid that. Melons by themselves and fruits by themselves. So I'm going to finish off this section with a little bit about macronutrient blends. What about those foods that combine different types of proteins and starches in the same type of food, right? Food that has fats and proteins, or a food that has starch and protein. Wouldn't that conflict? Wouldn't that be a food combining error? Okay, Mother Nature is not stupid. Mother Nature combines different elements in the same food in very, very particular arrangements and with enzymatical harmonic relations to one another that is dealt with properly in the system. So let's say you eat a nut, for example. It's a combination of fat and protein. Again, a nut is a very difficult thing to digest. However, when you eat it, because it's in its natural form, the body understands better what to do with this than if you take 2 varying food groups and eat them at the same time. The body will take that nut and it will prioritize, okay, most of this is proteins, so I'm going to start with the proteins first and prioritize that, and then I'll work on the starches. And it'll release enzymes in the proper way, right? But it only does that when you're eating a single food item with these macronutrient blends. It does not work this way if you're eating rice and lentils and meat and eggs and dairy in the same. That doesn't work like that, okay? So you do not have to worry about food combining when you're eating a single food item that is a macronutrient blend of proteins and starches or whatever. You'll release the digestive enzymes necessary for that breakdown properly. Okay, so let's just wrap this up. How can we put this in an easy to understand, condensed way that will make this an easier approach? Because food combining is a very long and detailed type of subject to try to cram into a short lecture. And I know I missed a lot of things, so if you have questions, obviously feel free to ask them below. But I'm going to try to condense this in a couple of principles that will help you from now on when you structure your meals. Principle number 1. When a concentrated starch, fat, or protein food is present in the meal, eat the concentrated starch, protein, or fat food to the exclusion of any other food type besides leafy green vegetables. Okay? When I say concentrated food item, I mean any kind of meat, any kind of legume, any kind of grain, any kind of dairy. These are all concentrated food items. Fruits and vegetables are not concentrated food items. Everything else is. So whenever you have a concentrated food item as part of the meal, let's just say potatoes, for example, you eat your potatoes with nothing. Just let's make it very easy. You eat that potato with absolutely nothing else except soft, leafy green vegetables. That's it. That's the only acceptable thing that you can pair with that sweet potato. There are some exceptions. You know, you can add a little bit of tomato, maybe avocado. I'm not suggesting that, but you can, but it's not ideal. Ideally, just leafy green vegetables. That's it. What about if it's meat? What about if it's lentils? Same thing. Leafy green vegetables. That's it. What if it's nuts? If you're eating nuts and you want to combine it with other stuff, no. Leafy green vegetables. That's it. Principle number 2. You never combine fruit with anything, like we said before. Fruit only goes with other fruits of similar sweetness or similar acidity. Principle number 3, you eat fast digesting foods earlier in the day and slow digesting foods later on in the day. Obviously, the concentrated foods are slower digesting, and a meal of many foods together is going to digest the slowest. So the simpler, the better. Think of a narrow hallway that is jammed with people, and I want to get those people to the end of the hallway as fast as possible. It would make sense to put my fastest runners at the beginning of the hallway and my slowest and fattest runners at the back. The fast runners get through really quickly, the medium runners, you know, they're trailing along behind, and the fat, slow people, they're at the end. If you put the fat, slow people at the beginning, what's going to happen? You're going to get backed up. You're going to get backed up big time. So a stupid behavior to employ would be breakfast of meat and potatoes and then try to have fruit for lunch. You just take my word for it. Don't do that, okay? And principle number 4, the less complicated the meal, the less food combining knowledge is necessary. The less complicated, the simpler the digestion, the better, the healthier you'll be. Just some random other considerations: coconut oil, olive oil, whatever, sesame oil. Okay, none of these oils mix with anything. These oils are what I would categorize as nutritional nonsense. They do not combine well with anything. These oils have been artificially extracted from their natural matrices, and they are just this void of fatty acid that does nothing for you. There is no such thing as an oil that is good for you. Anyone that tells you this is lying. You do not use free-floating oils in the body very well at all. Your body does not identify them as a proper nutrient. These oils are meant to be inextricable from their food compounds and eaten as a whole, not extricated. When the body takes them in, it doesn't recognize these free oils as anything in particular, it just sees them as a waste product. So adding this garbage to your food is a no-no. It is a food combining blasphemy. Do not add oil to anything that you eat. I won't say anything more about that. 2 last things I want to talk about. Water. Never drink water with any meal. Water is always best eaten at least 20 minutes beforehand, before your meal, or at least 2 hours after the meal. If your meal is just fruits, you can probably safely drink water an hour after the fruit meal, but anything else, give at least 2 hours. Even with fruit meals, I would say save the water for 2 hours after, just in case, but never drink water with your meals. The reason is because the water dilutes digestive juices that your body is secreting, and a diluted solution is a less potent solution. So you don't want a less potent solution trying to digest whatever it is you're trying to eat. Water is a huge no-no whenever you're eating. Water is always drank separately from your meals, okay? And the very last thing I want to talk about very quickly is food timing. I want you to respect the natural rhythms in the body. So you have 3 main phases that you go through during the day. So between the hours of 12 p.m. and 8 p.m., this is what we call the acquisition phase, okay? This is the time of the day where the body prefers to be taking in nutrients. It's when it's best geared for taking in food. So any of your eating, all of your eating should be done between the hours of 12 to 8. It's an 8-hour cycle. The body works on this 8-hour cycle. So from 12 to 8, that's when you eat. From 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. the next morning, that's what we call the digestion phase. This is when you are breaking down the food that you've eaten throughout the day. All right? So while the initial phases of sleep, all of this work is happening, and you're digesting, and you're breaking down, and you're getting ready to absorb these nutrients from the digested food. From 4 a.m. to 12 p.m. the next day, that is the elimination phase, okay? When you get up in the morning, have you ever noticed that in the morning, your throat might be a little bit raw, your breath smells a little worse in the morning generally than, later on in the day? This is because your body is eliminating the poisons associated with the prior meal. okay? If you start off your morning too early and you start eating, your body is a bit conflicted because it's preferring to just absorb what you've already eaten and eliminate through your breath and, you know, going to the washroom and whatnot. It prefers to eliminate and absorb during these early morning hours. So eating kind of divides the task. It's like if the garbage man is taking out garbage and then all of a sudden more trash is piling up, right? It's like, okay, I gotta go back and take the, it's dividing up the work improperly, right? So if you respect these tendencies, these preferences of the body, 12 p.m. to 8 p.m., that's when you eat. From 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., that's when you're sleeping. And then from 4 a.m. to 12 p.m., you know, if you want to have a little water in the morning, that's fine too. Just don't eat too early in the morning, okay? Save that from 12 to 8 p.m. Okay, guys, I know that was a lot to swallow. Thank you so much for sticking with me. Again, food combining is a very, very lengthy topic. It's not something I can discuss in just 2 seconds. And I know I missed a lot of things. I know there are going to be questions. So if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments below. I'm glad I had a chance to speak with you about this. Make sure to subscribe to the FreeMelon Society. You do not want to miss any of the important lectures and videos that I'm going to be releasing on this channel. Other than that, really hope you learned something today. Thank you once again, everyone, and I will see you next time on the FreeMelon Society.